Alright, what is up guys? I am back for another Zoids review, and man, I've got to tell you, they keep knocking it out of the park with these Zoids Wild Zero Zoids. I was going to say, oh, this one's another one of my favorites, but I've been saying that about all of them. They're all just so good, and so this is the Omega Rex. I purchased this around last August, if I'm not mistaken, along with some other things just to make sure that I got it before it was out of stock while it was still pretty affordable. This is basically a Titan class style Zoid, similar to something like not quite the size of the Death Sword, but it's more of like the Gojiless Iron Kong sort of size, and it definitely reflects that here with the model kit. It's a very, very large kit, and it's also has a very, very large box. But because it is a motorized kit and not an HMM, it was still fairly affordable. It ran me about $56 to import it. That's before shipping, of course. And I shipped it together with a couple of other kits. I got this at the exact same time as the Gatling Fox. And of course, I built those back to back, and I did a review of the Gatling Fox not long ago. And I really, really like this guy quite a bit. This is sort of the evolution of the Death Rex from the original Zoids Wild Zero line, and they sort of have taken that model kit and updated it with a couple of new features. So instead of those ridiculous jaw clamp things on the side, now these are sort of these stabilizers that come together when it opens its mouth to fire its signature Zoid's boss enemy charged particle beam that it has. And this Zoid has a counterpart in Zoids Wild Zero called the Geno Spino, and that thing is cool, but it's kind of ugly at the same time, so I passed up on that one in favor of the Omega Rex here, because I feel like the Omega Rex is the most appealing and the coolest of the Titan class Zoids Wild line that we've gotten so far. So I passed up on the Death Rex, although there is an HMM version of that coming out, and my friend Brad does have the motorized version from the original Zoids Wild Zero line. So I will have an opportunity to review that eventually. And I passed up on the Geno Spinos, but we do have this. So let's go ahead and talk about in terms of the anime. So in Zoids Wild Zero, the anime, this is developed in secret by Frank Land, one of the influential people in the Empire, and he sort of deploys it, and we have this sort of Evangelion unit, what was it, Unit 13, that went berserk, and you guys know what I'm talking about if you've seen it, where he puts a pilot in it unassumingly, and it sort of goes berserk and becomes out of control. And so he puts his partner, Hannah, in there, who initially is on board with it. Of course, she's just following orders until in episode 28, the thing goes berserk. And they have to sick not only the entire army on, including all of the protagonist characters, but also the Geno Spino, just to be able to disable this thing. And let me tell you, this thing is badass in the anime. Like, I just you get that moment of just laughing at how cool and ridiculous something is. I definitely had that moment with this thing. This thing is awesome. And so basically the gimmick with it in the anime is it has this special carbon black armor developed by the Empire, and it makes it very, very resilient to damage. And so all of the small arms fire or artillery from all of the other Zoids, whether it was an entire squadron of Kuaganos or a Styrazer Bazoodle squadron, even the Rising Liger and its blade couldn't penetrate the armor in this thing. And the Rising Liger had a clear shot at this vent back here, which would have disabled, of course, the charged particle beam, but they had no such luck. It was only the Geno Spinos that could actually damage this thing, and ended up being a draw when the Geno Spinos was able to finally get some damage in on it. The Geno Spinos had to destroy some oil tankers around the sort of port bay area they were fighting in to create a wall of fire that it could hide behind in order to get a clean shot at the Omega Rex, and the Omega Rex managed to fire off its charged particle beam twice during that fight, causing untold amounts of damage. After that fight, though, Hannah sort of is cast aside as the pilot of the Omega Rex, and later has another pilot adopted to continue to pilot it throughout the rest of the series. And towards the end of the series, when the Zero Greasus is berserk and on the rampage and fixing to destroy everything, the Omega Rex and the Genospinos team up to try to take down the Zero Grievous, and both of them are incapacitated in the process. I think both of those Zoids survived to the end of the series, but both of them got their asses thoroughly handed to them by the Zero Grievous, which is to be expected. That's mostly it for the anime. I would love to talk a little bit more about it in terms of the anime, but I need to watch all of Zoids Wild Zero. But those were some of its very noteworthy appearances. Definitely watch episode 28 and 29 if you want to see this thing in action. And of course, in the opening sequence to the second opening sequence to Zoids Wild Zero, we get to see the Rising Liger and the Omega Rex fight, and man, it just looks so cool. Let's take a quick look at the box before I set it aside here. So, again, pretty nice artwork on the front there. The black is really complemented against the nighttime sky there, and you can see just the absolutely destroyed background there from this thing in action. And we get to see all of the ports that it has for where it can equip different weapons, and we'll talk about that in a moment. But yeah, you can totally just deck this thing out in all kinds of different weapons, including like what looks like an alternate faceplate as well. That'd be pretty cool. And then we get the awesome charge particle beam there. Oh man, it's so cool. It brings back so much nostalgia of, you know, classic Zoids. Like, I guess this thing would be more so the equivalent of something like the Genobreaker or the Berserk Fury. But in terms of scale, this is actually the perfect segue to talking about the model kit itself. But in terms of scale, while this thing is absolutely massive compared to all of the other Zoids within Zoids Wild and Zoids Wild Zero, it would actually be a small or average size Zoid in the old school continuity because of the difference in scaling. So, as we pointed out before, you know, the little pilot characters are about this big. This is, again, 1/35th scale as opposed to 1/72nd scale model kit. So while this model kit may scale nicely next to your Berserk Fury or even your Gojulus, it would not scale favorably if it was the actual continuity of the two Zoids in canon next to each other. The classic Zoids are exponentially larger than the Zoids Wild and Zoids Wild Zero lines, but I think that's kind of cool that these two are so big in the anime and are still dwarfed by things like the Zero Grievous. It gives you this realistic sort of proportionality between the different animals, where it's like a wolf would not be the same size as a dinosaur. So that's something that was inconsistent with the old school Zoids. It's a little bit more accurate in Wild and Wild Zero, but not entirely. So let's go ahead and talk about the model kit itself. We'll talk about some of its features here. So again, this is originally modeled after the Death Rex kit, but of course all of its armor is changed. It's been remolded, and the weapons are remolded. So on the skeleton underneath, it is essentially exactly the same as the Death Rex, if you guys are familiar with that Zoid. But much like as is per the course with the Zoids Wild Zero line, they're taking the designs of the Zoids Wild line and upgrading them and making them a lot cooler. I don't have the pilot on there, of course, but the seat is pretty subtle there on the back. It has these awesome looking missile launchers right here where they peg in basically on all sides. And so there's no really a right or wrong way to connect them. They sort of just peg in on the two traditional Zoids Wild Zero pegs, where you can just kind of peg weapons anywhere on the Zoid for customization. And in the anime, it uses these missiles quite freely, and they're incredibly powerful. And actually, just the sheer size of these things, these missiles are bigger than some entire Zoids in the anime. And so when they had the squadrons of the Bazoodles and Styrazors and the other Ligers and stuff that were trying to take this thing down, a single missile from this thing and the splash damage it would create would blow up an entire battalion of those other Zoids. So yeah, these missiles are pretty powerful, and it's really interesting that they chose to implement those as its weapons of choice. But they're actually not, I shouldn't say they're missiles, they're actually just rockets, because they're not guided in any sense. They fire in a straight line trajectory from where they're launched from, so they don't have any guiding capability, so they're essentially just rockets. And of course it has two surface-to-air cannons right here, but other than that, it doesn't have a whole lot of small arms weaponry or point defense systems that can protect it from threats all around. But you could argue that it does not need that, because it's so heavily armored and protected, and most small arms fire from airborne Zoids or smaller Zoids just has absolutely no effect on this thing. And if you were to deploy this with any kind of strategic viability, you would probably do it in combination with other smaller support Zoids that could protect it, whereas you use this thing to destroy valuable, high-value targets like fortresses and structures and things like that with a charged particle beam, and it's just untold destruction. So I don't have the batteries in this thing because I typically don't put the batteries in these newer ones because I don't want to forget them and forget to take them out and have acid leak and stuff like that. I'm actually planning a day very soon to go ahead and open up all of my motorized Zoids for my entire collection and clean out the insides and just make absolutely sure that none of the ones that I've bought secondhand over the last couple of years have their batteries still in them. But essentially what you would do is when you would turn the giant switch on is back here. If it will do the thing, there we go. It's a little bit stiff. When you turn the switch on, it will do its normal walking motion, just like the Death Rex, but then these two black fins right here would swing forward, and they're actually locked by a gear at this angle. That's as far as they will fold forward on their own, so they just kind of move freely forward and back to that beyond that point, but once they get to this part, they'll only move any more forward if the motorized function is rotating that ratchet joint in there to get the gear to move backwards and the arm to swing forward even more. And then the head itself is really impressive, the amount of moving parts that are in there. You can see just the jaw, almost the neckline back here, like everything moves, and it's just super impressive and really intimidating the amount of moving parts they have on this thing. The actual cannon itself extends a little bit when you do that as well. There's lights inside that light this thing up in green when you do this, and of course it spins around, and it sort of spins in the spinning motion of the cannon itself actually rotates the joints for the head back down so that it can sort of cycle that animation, it can cycle that motion when the motorized function is working. So yeah, this thing is freaking cool. If you guys know somebody in Japan, these are probably pretty plentiful still in Japanese shops, but they're out of stock on a lot of the sites that allow you to order them from. So I think AmiAmi and HLJ no longer have this thing, but if you know somebody in Japan or you can get somebody to go to a local shop, you'll probably still have a pretty easy time finding it. That's how I essentially got the Zero Grievous more recently, which will be the last Zoids Wild Zero review I have down the pipeline. So let's do a quick size comparison. So I mentioned this thing was big, so let's go ahead and compare it to the Rising Liger, which this is not accurate anime scale. The Rising Liger is tiny compared to this thing in the anime, but this is still a pretty impressive scale. Like I said, this thing is big, and it's very long. On the subject of big dinosaurs, this one is not so much long as it is tall, but it's our other review that we just did. The Gogulus, which the Gogulus is so much taller that it can barely fit in the frame there. And actually the Gogulus has a pretty long tail as well. But you can kind of, I mean, if this is a benchmark for you guys, or you guys know how big the Gogulus is, you can pretty much tell how big the Omega Rex and the Death Rex and the Genospinos by extension are going to be. But yeah, still not anywhere close to as big as these classic Titans. And I wouldn't even necessarily consider the... Whoops, part just fell off the Gogulus. That's okay. He's very old. Anyway, that's about all I have to say about the Omega Rex. So I highly recommend this guy. He's just so cool. And my only real complaint is, again, just like the Gilraptor, the arms are just completely useless. They're super dinky, no articulation, they're tiny. It really does give you a sort of T-Rex vibe with it, which, again, is okay. But the Genosaur and the Berserk Fury don't have that problem. Mostly the Genosaur. The Genosaur has really great arms, so I don't understand why they couldn't have had some articulation with those arms, or at least put like a weapon on them or something. But yeah, those arms look super dinky, but the rest of the design really does make up for it. So, alright guys, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you guys next time. Do you guys miss the gaming content I used to do on this channel? Did you guys know this is actually my second channel? My wife Michelle and I over on the primary Starcross Souls channel do gaming content as well as content about conventions and cosplay and some of the niche fandoms we're into such as Fire Emblem, Fate, and Yu-Gi-Oh! I'm also doing a retrospective series on the entire Type Moon series and all of the Fate works. It's a series I'm very proud of and has the highest amount of editing and production quality on anything I've ever done in my entire career of making videos. So if you guys are interested in checking that out, make sure to follow us on the main Star-Crossed Souls channel, and follow Michelle and I on Instagram for her art projects and my cosplay projects. I'll see you guys next time.